A very good afternoon to all present. I'm Ria Rathi, founder and director of latestlaws.com. I would like to welcome you all on behalf of Team Latest Laws and also thank you all for your participation in today's Lexirum webinar on the topic How to Enforce Your Intellectual Property Rights. The webinar is also being telecasted live on latestlaws.com Facebook page. Today, we are privileged to have with us Mr. Shravan Kumar Bansal, advocate and senior partner at United IPR, which is a full-service IPR firm established in the year 1954. Mr. Bansal has had distinguished career in the field of IPR with an experience spanning over 30 years in litigation. He has expertise in prosecution and enforcement of patents, trademarks, and copyright cases. We are very grateful to you, sir, for sparing time and joining us for today's webinar. Now, I would like to request Shravan, sir, to commence his address.
Thank you, Ria Rathi, for the good introduction. And first of all, good evening, everybody. And first of all, I would like to thank latestlaws.com for arranging this webinar and endeavor made by them to utilize this difficult time in uniting the legal fraternity and industry and sharing knowledge pertaining to intellectual property rights. My focus as the topic today is that how to enforce intellectual property rights. I will add on how to effectively enforce intellectual property rights in the existing framework. Now, to create a new framework, we need the legislation approval, we need some laws to be passed by the parliament, which will not be a very easy process. So the right course is that what we have the legal framework existing, how to best possible use that. Now, nobody can deny this, the established fact that growth in the economy of the country today is directly linked to the protection of IPR. The same gives strength to the industry in expanding their operation in the country. Now, IPR rights, the unique feature of the IPR rights is they are territorial in nature. Separate enforcement is to be done in each country as per the available IPR laws in the respective country. In the current scenario, it also becomes necessary to devise a mechanism for IPR enforcement in an effective and budget-oriented manner, especially when the IPR owner has activities in multiple jurisdictions of the world. Moreover, counterfeiting and infringement is recurring nuisance, and accordingly, enforcement has to be made regularly. When I talk to the industry internationally, and when I ask them about how they basically decide the enforcement part, the budget is always a concern for them because they are not only looking at India, they are looking at the entire world. They have the operations worldwide. Even now, the Indian industry is expanding. Now, the Indian operations are also in the other jurisdictions of the world. So, to make the IPR effective and budget oriented, the costing is always a paramount issue everywhere. Now, I will also, in my presentation, I will focus that the cost-cutting mechanisms have to have the effective IPR mechanism and most comprehensive one and the maximum coverage, how we do it. And in this regard, I will definitely like to share some of my practical experiences because my firm has been doing extensive enforcement mechanism for Indian industry as well as for international industry in India, pan-India rather, I will say we have been doing extensively. Now, my experience suggests that Indian IPR laws confers to the international standards and rather are far more superior prevailing if we compare to the prevailing the laws in the other countries. When I say this with responsibility because see there are a number of permutations and combinations are possible that how we effectively enforce our intellectual property rights. Now I will start my presentation with brief introduction about the type of rights protected in India and the remedy which are available at present and how effectively and economically enforce the same as to have the maximum coverage. So in this regard, I will just like to start with my presentation. I will like to start with a brief introduction about the IPR laws that what all protection is basically granted in India. So please have the view on my presentation for a moment. Now, intellectual property is something which you create, and you create and you spend and you create a goodwill and reputation, anything which is created and you built up by adding to the goodwill and reputation, that is protected under law. Now, exclusive rights, when you create something, naturally a person will like to have the exclusive rights granted to those of the intellectual property. So once you have the exclusive rights, and in case somebody infringes it, so naturally you should be able to enforce that also. These intellectual property rights are primarily in the interest of the right holder, but primarily they are also in the public interest, because the law provides that the public should not be confused. So it is more in the public interest rather than the right holder interest. Now in India, a very brief outline that the intellectual property rights are basically divided into various headings. Like we have the trademarks, we have the copyrights, we have the patents, we have a designs and geographical indications and others also. Now, in case we see a brief, now I'm just giving a very brief outline so that everybody understands what I'm talking about. Like when we say about a trademark, in 2003, when the amendment came, the mark, basically the definition of the mark was expanded to basically include shape of goods, packaging, and combination of colors or any combination thereof. The traditional definition of the mark in India used to include a device, a brand, heading, label, ticket, name, signature, word, and numeral. Shape of goods and packaging and combination of colors were added later on. Now, these are some of the examples that how the trademarks are there. We can have a word mark, we can have a service mark, we can have a device mark, we can even have a color combination and packaging. All these can be protected, they can be registered, you can have a statutory right for this. Now, similarly, under the copyright, we can have the artistic work protected, we can have a literary work protected, we can have a musical work, dramatic work, sound recording, cinematographic films. Now, with the advent of technology, the definition of the literary work has been expanded to include computer programs and softwares. Similarly, the definition of artistic work has been expanded to include industrial drawings. And similarly, the definition of the musical work has been expanded to include cinematographic films. The designs is again the right which we get, which will be which protect the shape and configuration of the article, that is protectable under the Designs Act. And similarly, we have the Patents Act. Suppose we do any inventions, it may be a process or a product, that can be protected under the Patents Act. And then the geographical indication is also protected, where certain products which corresponds to the specific geographical location, that can be also protected in India. So just see, in India has a wide spectrum of protection of the intellectual property rights, which can be protected and enforced. Now this is at par with the international laws. Now this is one of the classical example where in one particular article or a product, there can be multiple intellectual property rights. For example, this is an iPhone, where the logo can be protected as a copyright. The iPhone word can be protected as a brand. We can also have a literary figure protected as a design. Even the drawings of the articles for which it is prepared, a two-dimensional drawing, that can be also protected as a industrial drawings under the Copyright Act. So in one particular device, we can have multiple intellectual property rights that can be evolved and that can be protected. Now, IPR enforcement, I would like to give that how the India is placed. In India, there are primarily three types of enforcement that can be done. Enforcement through the civil remedy, where the district courts or the high courts have the power. We have the enforcement through the criminal remedy, where the police authorities have the power to go and seize the goods directly without the intervention of the courts, or at some point of time, even the magistrates can also direct police authorities to conduct the enforcement actions. And then we have the enforcement through the custom authorities, where the customs IPR rules were also formulated, and the customs department also has the power to suspend consignments containing infringed articles which are imported into India. Now, the remedies which are available under the different IPR rights, like in the trademarks, we have the civil remedy, the criminal remedy, and with the customs. Like, in case we are enforcing a trademark, either we can go through the court order under the civil remedies, we can go with the police, or with the magistrate order for the search and seizures, that can be the criminal laws. The customs can also act and enforce those. Similarly, under the copyrights, we have the three remedies which are available. Designs criminal remedy is not available. So police, they don't have a power to go directly and seize the goods under the Designs Act. In the design, we only have the civil and the customs. And under the patents, it is only the civil remedy which can be enforced, because the patents adjudication is a bit complex process, because a lot of technicalities are involved. So the legislation in its wisdom has kept the patents only at the civil remedy for enforcement. Now, when we enforce the IP rights, one should understand that the infringers and counterfeiters, normally they act in a clandestine and surreptitious manner. They are unknown people. Sometimes they are not identifiable. So our Indian law, basically the jurisprudence provide in India, we have the John Doe orders, where the orders for search and seizure for enforcement can also be basically enforced against unknown persons and firms. And on their identification, those particular persons can be substituted in the main petitions. And we have the Anton Pillar orders, where the search of the premises and seizure evidence without prior warnings, that can also be done. Now, these type of John Doe orders and Anton Pillar orders are very, very necessary to meet the ends of justice. Because otherwise, what will happen is that the infringer will get all the time in the world to remove the infringing articles. So there has to be some element of surprise that the John Doe orders and Anton Pillar orders can be granted in the absence of the infringer, and the goods and the infringed articles can be seized from the premises. Now, under the civil enforcement, normal practice with the Indian courts is the court commissioner's appointment. Normally, when we take an action against some infringers or counterfeiters, it is normally a practice that the applications for appointment of court commissioners are filed, where the court commissioners are empowered by the court to visit the premises of the counterfeiters or infringers to seize infringing articles. Now, these court commissioners primarily are the commissioners, which is an extension of the court, and their duty basically is to seize the goods and also to preserve the evidence. Because in the absence of any court commissioners, the goods will not be seized, and tomorrow the counterfeiters, when they come to the court, they will deny their involvement. So naturally, the preserving of evidence is very, very necessary in the appointment of court commissioners, and these type of orders are normally granted by the courts in case of a good prima facie case being established by the right holder. Now, under the legal framework, under the IPR, because primarily it was found that India is more a trading country and most of the goods are coming from outside. So the need was felt that the custom IPR rules be formed. So IPR Imported Goods Enforcement Rules 2007 was formed in the year 2007, where the custom authorities were given power to seize infringing articles which are imported into India. So that was a very landmark step by the Indian legislation, which came in 2007. Now, some of the salient features of IPR enforcement through customs, like India is one of the very few countries, like we have the other countries where the custom rules are there, like the USA is there, China is there, we have Europe where they're good, Australia is there. So India is also among the few countries where these customs enforcement is very much possible. Now, our Indian customs rules are very exhaustive in nature, like they cover trademark, designs, copyrights, and geographical indications. Patents was when initially the custom rules were formulated, the patents were the part of the notification. But later on, by notification, in 2018, the patents was excluded, because it was meant that because the custom officials are not fully equipped to adjudicate patent cases, so it was excluded because we always require intervention from the court. Now, something very unique feature about the custom enforcement in India, because the custom authorities are self-adjudicating authorities. They have a power for the suspension of any consignments. They have a power for adjudication, ordering destruction, imposing penalties upon the importer. So at no point of time, the matter we have to go to the court. The customs are self-imposed body who have all the powers right from the seizure up to the decision imposing penalties. I have seen in other countries, like, I was doing some matters like in Bangladesh or neighboring countries, and like in Malaysia or other countries, where I have seen that the customs do act and they seize the consignment, but thereafter the matters are referred to the court for further adjudication. Now, this is not the case in India. So Indian custom IPR rules are far more superior. Now, for the purpose of custom enforcement, naturally, the recordial of IPR rights is necessary. So India is a big country with major ports and minor ports, approximately 100 ports. And so one centralized recordial is also very much possible. Now, custom recordial is valid for 5 years, and then it can be extended. And in certain cases that have been seen, when the consignments of counterfeits are coming and the custom authorities have been able to seize those. And the custom authorities also have a power to conduct the investigation. So this is again a very, very important step, where the custom enforcement was introduced in India. Now, one of the key divisions of the customs is the risk management division. We say the RMD. Now, the RMD is a information sharing body of the customs, intelligence sharing body of the customs. Now, whenever any consignment is seized with the custom authorities, information through the RMD is immediately transmitted to all the ports in India. So RMD plays a very, very important role. So suppose we have a consignment of counterfeits, which is coming into India from China, for example, and we have a seizure taking place at Nhava Sheva ports. So immediately all the details of the consignment, including the importer, exporter details, are immediately transmitted to the other ports in India. In that case is that suppose tomorrow the same importer imports a consignment from Kolkata port or from Tuticorin port or from Mundra port or different ports. So those can also be interdicted. So this is a very, very important. RMD role is very, very paramount. Now, this is very brief how the Indian customs, we can go online, we can record our IPR rights with the customs. It is very simple and very economical as well. So this is again example of the IPR enforcement. Now, how to make IPR enforcement effective and budget oriented, and how to best possible use like interplay between the civil, criminal, and custom enforcement. Now, normally the setup in India, like when we go for the civil enforcement, normally civil enforcement is possible directly by the High Court original side. Because see, when I say original side, because there are 4 High Courts in India which have the original jurisdiction. We have the Delhi, Kolkata, Chennai, and Mumbai. And we have the district courts. That is also the position where the civil enforcement is possible. Now, both the High Court, the original side and the district courts have the power to grant the injunctive reliefs, appointment of court commissioners, grant of damages, grant of rendition of accounts, freezing of assets, and other reliefs. For example, the delivery of goods, ordering destruction, and all those particular other reliefs are also possible. So when we go for the civil enforcement, we have the option of going to the High Court or to the district courts. Now, how to have the most cost-effective measure? Normally, the civil courts in relation to IPR rights can be filed before the district court or before the High Court, as I've already said. Civil cases can be filed directly in the High Court on the original side in case we enhance the pecuniary jurisdiction. So when we enhance the pecuniary jurisdiction to a certain value, and so we can directly go to the High Court for granting all the reliefs. But however, the original jurisdiction under the law, under the Trademark, Copyright or Designs or the Patent Act, it vests with the district court. So it is not obligatory for me to go to the High Court. I can always file a cases in any district courts having jurisdiction. Now, court fee and official fee, because now these are some important differences, because my focus is effective in enforcement of IP cost-effective manner. Normally, when we go to the High Court and we raise a pecuniary jurisdiction, so that involves more court fee, and we have to pay that. We have to pay more court fee.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Some questions are coming in. Question I can read. It is.
See, what I can do, I can finish off my presentation, and then probably I think we have kept some time for the question and answers also.
Yes, sir, you can continue, sir. The questions will be taken at the last.
I think because we will have 15, 20
Yeah.
minutes for the
So
question.
Ria will be asking the questions. She will ask the questions in the end.
Okay, that would be better. Okay, thank you very much. Like when we go to the High Court, naturally we have to pay more court fee. And normally when the court commissioners are also appointed, that is also a very important consideration. Normally it is seen that the court commissioner's fee, which is appointed by the court, and actually the fee is fixed. If we compare to the court fee structure and the court commissioner fee structure for the district courts and the High Court, there is a remarkable difference. Now, when we file the cases in the district courts, who are also competent to grant all the reliefs, the costing is tremendously reduced. In fact, my experience is, the costing is 10 times less in the district court than in the High Court. Like for example, in the High Court, suppose we are paying a court fee of ₹100. In the district court, we are just paying a court fee of ₹10. And the court commissioner fee is primarily also very less. So here is a point of difference, that in case we can get the same reliefs from the district court as also from the High Court, depending upon the circumstances, we can also enforce our rights very effectively by filing the petition in the district courts. Now, it has also been seen, like, the time frame from the trial and disposal of the cases, because in the High Courts, normally the time frame for the trial is very high. And the disposal of cases also takes a lot of time because of the recording of evidence and all those parameters. It takes a long time. While in the district court, actually the time for the trial and the disposal of cases is quickly very fast. Like even my experiences today, like in some of the complex matters, for example, the patent cases, where the life of a patent is only 20 years. By the time, the trial, the matter is disposed of after trial, the life of the patent is already expired. So in the Indian history, probably I have not seen, any patent cases finally decided after trial. So basically, so these are some considerations which are very important. Similarly, there are some online enforcement laws in India, or also because most of the counterfeiting is happening online nowadays. So Indian IPR online enforcement laws are very robust. Like in this slide, I can show that, like there are multiple websites where who are dealing in the counterfeit selling. So we have not to file cases against the different websites. A single legal action against multiple websites can be clubbed. And we can make, the unknown websites also a party in that. John Doe, we can club that. We can also join, ISPs, which are internet service providers, that can also do. Even the quad-timed actions are also permissible. Quad-timed action is something, future infringement, something likely to happen, which is not existing today, but which is a probable infringement. So that can also be clubbed together. And dynamic injunctions, where multiple websites are there, or the rogue websites are there. We have a recent decision which is passed by the Delhi High Court in the Software Communication Limited matter, where the dynamic injunctions are passed by the courts. Now, for the purpose of enforcement, now how to do more effective enforcement, and when we have the options of the civil, criminal, and customs enforcement, how to decide the issue and how to make the enforcement very cost effective. So we have to adopt various, but like when I have an option of going through the civil enforcement, I also have the option of going through the criminal enforcement and the custom enforcement, how to decide that. Now, I would like to share some of my experiences in this matter. Now, suppose I have to do a market sweep. Now, there is a big market where a lot of infringers are there. And those infringers are operating in a clandestine manner within the same police station. Suppose there are 5, 6 establishments where counterfeits are sold. In those cases, I will prefer going through a police action and a criminal action. Because by filing a complaint before the police station, because most of these offenses like trademarks and copyrights, they are cognizable offenses where the police can directly take action. Only a rider is that in a trademark matter, we have to get an opinion from the Register of Trademarks. There is a section 115 of the Trademarks Act. Now, the police with the help of police and filing a complaint, the police can seize the goods and the raid can be conducted in 4 to 5 locations simultaneously. Now, in these circumstances, suppose I go to the court for filing a civil action. Now, in that case, I will get an injunction order. I can get a court commissioner appointed. But normally, in case I have to raid 5 locations, there will be 5 court commissioners that will be appointed by the court. So the costing becomes very, very high. Because then I have to, the court commissioner's fee has to be done. The program has to be coordinated. They will all have to be visited to the site for the purpose of seizure. We have to take a police help, a local police station, and the seizure that is to be effected. So the costing increases tremendously. So in these circumstances where multiple infringers are there in the same area, so it is always advisable, I will say, now in the criminal enforcement, the remedy which I am getting is the seizure of goods, the arrest of a person who can definitely granted a bail. And when the case concludes, the punitive action, imprisonment or fine. Now there is no system for getting damages or reddition of accounts in criminal action. But once we raid the premises on the basis of the criminal action through the police, and we are able to identify the infringers, and we also come to know that some of the infringers, for example, they have large assets at their disposal. They have the plant and machinery, equipment, and assets. Now we can always file civil actions based on a criminal enforcement action. Like these type of actions are already tested by us. Like these are some examples in Luxottica case where we were appearing for the plaintiff, where the Ray-Ban sunglasses, in Gujarat, and we were able to seize 50,000 counterfeits. In those cases, the person was arrested, the goods were seized, but later on, because we found that he was a big importer and he has all the assets at their disposal, so we also filed a civil suit for injunction and damages in the High Court, and where the successful orders were granted. Similar is one of the cases, point B, which is the Under Armour, where we conducted some FIR action, the police raid action in the city of Ludhiana, and it was found that the accused, the infringer was dealing in multiple counterfeits, and then the FIR was registered against him. Then we filed a case for civil enforcement action for damages against him. That is also possible. So the position is we can always select and choose. Like when we do the criminal action, in case after the action we find that the large assets are also available with them, with the infringers, we can always file a subsequent civil enforcement action against them, and for the purpose of grant of damages, because the evidence is already there with us. Because once the FIR is there, the goods are already seized. So in that cases, see, the position is we already have substantial evidence with us. Now, we can always, like I have said, that the civil action can always be filed. And the law also says that the civil actions and the criminal remedies can go simultaneously. This was the case decided by the one of the matters in the Sumit machine case by the Chennai High Court, where the issue came that when there is a civil remedy, why the criminal remedy was initiated. So the court came to the conclusion that both the civil remedies and the criminal remedies can go together. Now, sometimes it is always better to involve market associations in criminal enforcement. Like I give you certain examples, because we have to control our budgets. Now, suppose take an example that there is a market, and which is a notorious market, and dealing in counterfeits of a brand of a certain right holder. And when we raid that particular market, and we are able to seize goods from 5-6 locations, normally there is always a market associations or a trade unions which are operating on those jurisdictions. It is normally seen that those market associations always come to the rescue of their infringers. They come, they intervene. At that point of time, and some agreements are done with the market associations that, okay, we can go loose in the sense we can be soft in enforcement part, provided the undertaking is given by the market associations that they will foresee that in future no counterfeits of this particular right holders are traded in that particular market. So this has been a very good thing, because that will save my extensive future cost of doing actions in that particular market. So this is very effective remedy that always have a support of the market associations that will reduce my costing for future enforcement in a large manner. Now, one such example, like, we did some actions in Tirupur. Tirupur is a place which is very famous for manufacturing of garments, and a lot of these export units are also there. Like, we did some criminal actions there and the remote areas, and we got very good support from the police authorities. And in that case, we were able to seize a lot of goods. And thereafter, once the goods were seized and cases were registered against them, the market associations, they intervened, and probably, we made a dialogue with them that, okay, make ensure and issue a circular in the market that no counterfeits of this particular right holder will be manufactured. So you foresee that. And normally it is seen that the local industry, which comes under the market association, they abide by the verdict of the market association. So this is a very good step. And even in the criminal enforcement, like, see, we have been in these two cases where we conducted some raid actions in Tirupur. And the court was very cooperative, and the police we got a very good support from the police authorities. And the trial was completed within 6 months. And accused was found guilty and sentenced for one year imprisonment. So this is again a very good step, and from the police authority. How to link the market enforcement with the custom enforcement? Like, where we have the importer, like, for example, we have an importer, and the details are very much available with us that there is an importer who regularly imports counterfeits from the neighboring countries. So in that case, instead of filing a civil action with the court or going to the police authorities for market seizures, we can file a complaint with the custom authorities. We have our IPR rights recorded with the customs, and we share the information with the custom authorities. And then the custom authorities will check, will scrutinize all the consignment imported by that particular importer. And then that can be very effectively done. Because when we go to the civil action or go to the market action for the market enforcement, see, there are a number of layers which are involved. Like, we have to find the warehouses, the manufacturing units, investigators are involved, my offices are involved, the police agencies are involved, court orders are involved, so a number of layers are involved. Now, suppose we can do in enforcement through customs, and we have a specific information about the importer. So it is always better to file a complaint with the custom authorities, to pursue the matter with the custom authorities. And my experience is that in last 5-6 years, I've seen we have been getting tremendous support from the custom authorities. A lot of these consignments containing counterfeits have been seized by the customs. Then we can also use the RMD of the Risk Management Division of the Indian Custom, because custom offices have limitations. Like, for example, in case they have to check unknown consignments, then the custom authorities normally they will check 3 to 5% of only the consignments. Only 3 to 5% of the consignment, because it is not possible for them to check all the consignments. To check today a 40-feet container or a 20-feet container, it involves a manpower of around 20 people. It involves around 18 to 20 hours. Now, in one particular port, for example, Nhava Sheva port, daily, for example, 2,000 consignment come. So it is not practical for the custom authorities to check all the consignments. So the position is, in case we have some information available with us and we share with the RMD, that has proved to be very effective. Like, for example, today I have done some market trade And on the market rate, I'm able to counterfeits are also recovered. I'm also able to find that the assets are also available with them. I'm able to identify those importers. I know their GST numbers, I know their names, I know their addresses, I know their TIN numbers and other details. Whatever market trades I do, either through the civil actions or the criminal actions, I share details of all those seizures with the RMD of the customs. Now, once I share the details with the RMD of the customs RMD immediately circulate the same. To the other custom ports. Now, for suppose tomorrow the same infringer imports those particular counterfeits, his consignments are compulsory checked. So this is something very, very effective linkage we do with the civil enforcement, criminal enforcement, and customs. Now, custom enforcement does not involve much expenditure. It is very economical because the customs will seize the products, you go and join the proceeding, adjudication is by the cases we have seen, the importer does not turn up, he runs away, and the cases, 80% of the cases are decided ex parte, the goods are destroyed, the import-export courts, numbers of the importers are blacklisted, quantities which are seized are very, very high. So once we effectively enforce the customs, one will find less pressure upon the market. If you are more active on the customs, the right holder is more active on the customs, then the effect in the market basically decreases tremendously. Now, these are some basically my guidelines. Now, I will like to basically, before I proceed further, I will like to add on some of my experiences. What I've seen, when we go for the criminal action enforcement, now at the time of seizure, we find, the person infringer has large machine available with them for the purpose of manufacturing counterfeits. Police authorities somehow feel reluctant in seizing the machinery and equipments. They say that, okay, we will, although they can seize that, but normally the legal issues comes, or maybe the police is not that knowledgeable about the law. They say that, okay, we will just seize the infringed and the counterfeit articles. For machinery and equipment, basically, we will not seize them. So the infringer will have a leverage that, okay, the goods are seized, but the plant and equipments are left out, and he will use all those plant and machinery for the purpose of manufacturing other counterfeits. So where we have the information beforehand that infringer has large machinery and equipments, in those cases, it is always better sometimes to resort to the civil remedy and the court commissioner, where the court can definitely grant orders for the seizure of plant, machinery, and equipments. Similarly, it has been seen, like there are counterfeits which are stored in the warehouse, and we have the information about the warehouse, and warehouses are always locked, are bolted, locked. Now, in those cases, in case I go with the police authorities and they have some hesitation in break open the locks. So in those cases, the time is wasted. So in those cases, sometimes the civil action supervisory of the court can be resorted to. The civil action would be more appropriate because the court can grant you power for break open the locks. Sometimes we find that the local market associations are very, very active, and we anticipate some market protest. So in that case, we may not be very comfortable with the direct police action. We always need a supervisory of the court. So in those circumstances, also the civil actions can also be beneficial. Now, one of the cases we tested, and that really worked out, like where there are multiple brands available in the same locality, in the name of different right holders. And we have to do, and all those right holders, they come together on the same platform for the purpose of enforcement. Now, suppose I go for the civil action, then I am filing, suppose there are 5 right holders, and I have to raid action for the 5 different right holders of the similar locations, of the similar locality. Now, in that case, what will happen? I will have to file petitions before the court. I will have to pay a court fee separately in all the matters, and court commissioner is appointed. They will go and seize the good with the help of local police. Now, what we did was, we filed one petition in the court for one right holder and have a court commissioner appointed. The court commissioner went to the place and did it. Simultaneously, for the other 4, we filed the direct police raid actions. We have not gone to the court, but we went to the police and recorded a complaint. So what happened was that simultaneously raid was conducted, 1 by the court commissioner and 4 for the direct by the police. So we saved extensive cost of the court commission. So that really worked out, because the 5 right holders, they came together. 1 of them gone to the court, obtained an order, seizure was done. Simultaneously, the raid action was done by the police for the other right holders. So all the court working and the savings and the court fee and also the court commissioner fee, that was extensively saved. So that was really worked well. Sometimes local issues also arises. We have to take into that the consideration. For example, sometimes the local traders, because these counterfeiters are highly influential people, strong backing, and sometimes they're influential. So in those type of cases, sometimes it is always better to have a supervisory of the court, or some particular areas they are dominated by a particular community, and we anticipate that there may be a law and order issue there. So in those cases, we need always to have a supervisory of the court. So these are some of my tips normally in deciding the civil actions and the criminal actions or the custom actions, how we do. Now, naturally, when we file for the civil cases, the jurisdiction becomes very, very important part. And fortunately, the Indian laws are very flexible on those. We can raid the premises anywhere in India, and we can file the petitions on the convenience of the plaintiff, where the right holder. We have a section 20 CPC which governs basically the jurisdiction, territorial jurisdictions of the courts in India, where the cause of action, where the defendant resides, carries on business, or a cause of action partial wholly arises. Then we also have, exceptions. We have section 134 and section 62, subsection 2 of the Copyright Act, which provide for the additional forum to the convenience of the plaintiff for the purpose of filing the cases. Now, these are some of the cases where the courts have highlighted the various provisions, like averments made in the plaint are sufficient because most of the activities of the defendants are clandestine and surreptitious manner. They don't issue any invoices against sale. Now, suppose there is a specific averment in the petition that the defendant activities are there, the goods are sold in a particular jurisdiction. The court will presume jurisdiction for the purpose of as an interim measure, and it becomes the mixed question of law and fact, which will be decided after trial. Now, when we do with the online enforcement part, in those type of cases, normally because internet website, we have a universal jurisdiction where because the products are sold online, so it's a sale, purchase, or commercial activity through the websites. In case the websites, for example, have accessibility, they are interactive, the goods can be sold or purchased in Delhi. So naturally, we can always file the cases where the part of cause of action arises. So these are, but the website should be interactive websites. The goods should be capable of being sold or purchased. And so there's a World Wrestling Entertainment versus Reshma collection matter where the courts have discussed about the interactive websites. In one of the judgments which came in 2018 in Marico case, the court even held that IndiaMart, because most of the industry, they have presence on IndiaMart and they are soliciting business on IndiaMart, the court came to the conclusion that even the interactive websites, and the court held that the court will have the jurisdiction part. So this is my presentation where I've been able to cover, the enforcement mechanisms and the different interplay of the civil actions, the criminal actions, and the customs part, and how to effectively deal with this.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. This brings us to the question answer segment of the webinar. We will now take some questions from our audience.
Mhm.
So one of the questions is asked by Shobana Takiyar. She is asking that in a case of trademark application for registration, if it is declared abandoned, what is the remedy available?
See, according to me, the application which is abandoned, it is not an adjudicated order. It will not operate as a res judicator. Now we'll have to see why the application has been abandoned. Now, applications for the trademark can be abandoned on various grounds. Like, for example, my application is accepted, some opposition is filed, and there's a statutory limit of filing a counter statement within 2 months, which is non-extendable. Now, suppose for some reasons I'm not able to file a counter statement. In those cases, the application cannot be restored, but it is always better to file a fresh application. So the earlier abandonment order will not come in the way because that can always be filed. Now, suppose some application is filed due to non-prosecution abandonment, that we have not been able to pursue the application abandoned. So we'll have to see the reasons, like, the hearing notice has not come, or whatever the reasons are. There is always a provision for the review of that. And in case there is some procedural lapse on part of the department or something like that, the application can always be restored, or then the application can be refiled. So it is not a very major lapse. So the right can always be restored.
Okay, so next question is by Varinder Dhiman. He is asking what is the difference in actions to be taken against an entity which is manufacturing infringing materials and an entity transacting in infringing materials?
See, I think this is a very, very good question, and we have a judgment from the Division Bench of Delhi High Court in Lali Enterprises case. I've had, everybody involved in the infringement chain is liable. Maybe he's a manufacturer, he's a trader, or an importer, or an exporter. Everybody who's involved in the infringement chain is liable. So our law basically does not demarcate any lining between the manufacturer or a trader.
Another question asked by this user is what is the scope and extent of usage of ADR laws in enforcing IPR laws?
See, can you say ADR? Can you repeat the question?
Dispute resolution, mediation, like arbitration, mediation.
See, the position is the mediation. I always prefer for the mediation part. See, to be very frank, because the mediation cuts short many things. Like in many cases, we have seen, when the right holder enforces the rights and he's able to get the relief, the seizures are done, the matters are pending in the court, and through market associations or somebody sometimes, and he's able to undertake, like, that he will not manufacture the products in future, or in case of future infringement, he will pay some damages like this. So normally, the right holders are mostly business people. And once the infringer comes to the court and say that he will surrender his rights and he will not contest and he undertakes, in 80% of the cases, the right holders agree to this. So mediation plays a very, very important role, because it cuts short the pendency of the work. Because tomorrow when the trial is conducted and everything, what damages you are going to get in the future, you can get with the infringer during the mediation proceedings. And the mediation proceedings are very, very wide sometimes. Like, many times I have seen in my cases, suppose I sometime, for example, I raid a trader, and the trader comes to me and say that, see, I was only a trader under misconception, I was dealing in the products. So we can say, okay, we can go soft against you and we can drop you, we can record and tell, provided you disclose the name of a group you have been purchasing the product. So see, then the part of investigation, and we will keep his name secret in that. So in those cases also, see, the position is through the intervention, mediation part, we can catch hold of the source, because right holder always like to go to the source. So mediation can help in number of ways. So I think it is a very, very important aspect, the ADRs.
Yes. Another question is, sir, how are financial damages calculated by the courts, and what is done with the seized counterfeit goods?
See, normally, the damages are calculated on various accounts. Like in case of a manufacturing unit, the quantum of seizure which is there, the assets, and all these aspects are very much paramount, like, in deciding the damages part which is there. Now, in many cases where the infringers are repeat habitual infringers or pirates, so naturally the damages part will be much more. That is also there. So this is very, very important part, the damages part, which is decided. These are all important considerations normally. And now, especially in light of the commercial courts we have now, IPR is a part of the commercial disputes. So grant of damages is also now more and more in the limelight. That is it.
Okay, sir. And Shiveen Banga is asking a question. What are the difficulties faced in effective enforcement of IP rights in cases of cross-border disputes?
See, cross-border dispute, because I have said, because the question will have to be clarified. Like, when we say cross-border disputes, means these all rights are territorial in nature. Because in case we are doing some seizure action or we are doing some injunctive relief, that will only be effective in India. That is our position. Now, when we say cross-border can be like, in case the goods are coming from outside into India. So naturally, we have the custom rules. So naturally, the Indian laws can prevent those counterfeits being traded and manufactured in India. The customs can also stop that. Now, many times, like during the online trading, like, we have the websites, for example, they're based in Singapore or some Hong Kong, but the goods are trading into India. So in those cases, the court can always pass orders against those websites selling the products in India. The direction can also be given to the DOT, which is the Department of Telecommunications, wherein, where the sale of those counterfeits can be prevented into India. So these are mechanisms like this. But no, like suppose, and somebody is exporting counterfeits from India. So that will also be considered used in India. We can prevent export of counterfeits or infringed articles from India. But suppose some infringement is happening in Nepal or infringement is happening in Bhutan. Now, in that case, our Indian laws are not going to help. Then we will have to go to those countries and we have to explore the laws in those countries.
Is muted. So the next question is, when a customer makes a purchase and realizes it's good, what should they do?
See, the purchaser can inform the right holder, that these are counterfeit. He can address them a letter, or even the purchaser, like criminal law. Anybody can set the criminal law in motion. Like, it is not only the right holder who can file the case for the criminal action in India. Like, even the purchaser of the products counterfeit can file a criminal complaint against the person. There are remedies under the Consumers Act. That is also there. We have seen certain cases where the consumers have gone to the court, like some shopkeeper or some trader had deceived him. So these are some remedies which are also there. That is. But what I have seen normally, the right holders are very, very sensitive. In case some consumer court complaint comes to them, either online sale or there, they immediately do the proper investigation and take some actions.
Another question is quite connected. Online sale of counterfeit goods and how difficult it is to catch them.
See, in the 21st century, like the position is, because as the technology is improving and the counterfeits online is also taking place in a very large manner. But fortunately, see, our Indian laws are very robust. Like, counterfeiting, we can do proper investigations. We have the remedies, where the number of the same sellers are there on the different websites. And then the court orders can be taken against them, move their URLs, resource locators. We can identify those. The court can immediately direct them to remove those. And where there is a sales of business to business sales, which are not intermediaries, websites. So the actions can be also taken directly against them. So there are a number of remedies. We can file complaint before the cyber cells also. So there are a number of remedies which are available. And the industry, is taking a lot of measures against them. And in a very, very cost-effective manner, like the judgment which I showed in my presentation, where a number of rogue websites were there. And then they were all combined in one action and the action was taken.
Okay, sir. Law School Dean from CPJ has asked, how effective is the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture while dealing with its IPR?
See, because the Plant Varieties Act in India is in progress, and we have the Act of Plant Varieties Act as well. So in case of in case of any, the hybrid formations, in case I have a protection under the Plant Varieties Act, so that is very, very much effective, no doubt about it.
And the last question which we'll be taking is, what is done with the counterfeited goods?
See, the counterfeited goods ultimately, because naturally the right holder will definitely like that counterfeit goods should not go into the market. So ultimately the destruction has to take place of the counterfeit goods. And the court can order for the destruction of goods. Even with the customs also, the counterfeit goods are ordered to be destroyed. So ultimately they have to be destroyed. And there is a parameters for destruction also, because we have to keep a number of things in mind, the pollution control certificates and all those. It is not just like that a person goes and just destroys the counterfeit. The permission from the government agencies are very much required. In case the goods are in large quantities, how they are to be basically destroyed. So the destruction part is definitely there.
And lastly, sir, would you like to give some advice to young lawyers on the career?
I say it's the only practice which is global in nature, because see, now this is a very upcoming field and very interesting field and very diverse field. So this is something very interesting field, and every person should adopt. And in case somebody has a technical knowledge about it, that will definitely going to help. Because there were certain students from Dehradun who came to my office, they were studying, technical knowledge and also the IPR. So they came to that, okay, what scope we have of the technical knowledge with the IPR, and then, under the patents field, biotechnology field, or mechanical field, or under the Information Technology Act. So today the scope is very much widened. It is not only simple trademark or copyright matters we are dealing. We are dealing with certain complex issues of industrial designs, 2-dimensional drawings, 3-dimensional drawings, shape, configuration. So some technical knowledge are always required in that. So like, there is an intellectual property right in everything. So it is a wanted field today, but one has to work very hard on this. But rather, every field is laborious field, but there is a lot of scope in this. There's a lot of scope in this, no doubt.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us for this session. It
Thank
has
you very much.
been a very enriching experience. Thank you to our viewers for joining for this webinar. For our next Lex Item webinar, we are pleased to inform that Honorable Justice S.N. Dhingra, former judge of the Delhi High Court, has agreed to join us. The date, timings, and registration details for the webinar will be available shortly on latestlaws.com and other social media handles of Latest Laws. With this, we would like to wrap up this session. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bansal sir, and
yes,
the
yes.
team of United IT.
And my thanks to the Latest Laws again, for such a great endeavor, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.